In the NFL, 10-6 gets some coaches a raise. This past season, it got Lovie Smith fired. That's because of how the Chicago Bears got to 10-6. They won 7 out of their first 8 games. At that point, the playoffs seemed like a foregone conclusion. However, for the second year in a row, the Bears crumbled over the second half of the season, wound up missing the playoffs despite finishing with a 10-6 record. And so, after a long and mostly successful tenure, Lovie Smith has been fired, replaced by Mark Trestman. Now, Trestman's sort of an outside-the-box hire. He's been the head coach of the Montreal Alouettes of the Canadian Football League for the past few years. He does have some NFL experience, but it's all been as quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator. This is his first shot at a head coaching job in the NFL. We'll see. We'll see how it goes over. Lovie Smith is a guy who was extremely popular in the locker room, if you believe everything you hear. Known as a player's coach, a guy players like to play for, a guy with a lot of credibility. Not sure Trestman is going to have that same credibility, at least right off. Now, Trestman did hire a guy to run the defense who does have credibility. I'm talking about Mel Tucker, most recently defensive coordinator of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's worked at several places around the NFL. He is known as a guy that players respect and like to play for. He will be installing the Tampa 2 defense, the same type of defense Chicago has been running under Lovie Smith. So we don't expect a whole lot of changes on the defensive side of the ball, and that's a good thing for the Bears. They finished 5th in the NFL in total defense this past season. It was the offense that was the problem. The offense, really, the failure to find a good offense was Lovie Smith's downfall. He went through many offensive coordinators, from the Ron Turners of the world to Mike Martz to Mike Tice, and just wasn't able to find anything that worked. This past season, Chicago finished 28th in the NFL in total offense, 29th in passing offense. The Bears only passed for 187 yards a game. So is it the scheme that's a problem, or is it the players in Chicago? Really, Lovie Smith has never been able to find a good quarterback. Smith's best team, that Super Bowl team that lost to the Indianapolis Colts, I believe in 2006, they were led by quarterback Rex Grossman, who was really ridiculed that season and the next. So the Bears moved on from Grossman, brought in a guy in Jay Cutler who, when the Bears brought him in, nearly everybody was saying finally they found a franchise quarterback, an elite quarterback. But you look at what Cutler has done, leaves a lot to be desired. Cutler is a guy, he may be worse for the franchise as a whole than a guy like Grossman, because people recognized that Grossman was the problem. As I said, Grossman was really a target there in Chicago. Criticism was heaped on him. He was eventually run out of town. But Cutler does just enough, has the tools, can play just well enough from time to time that I think a lot of people still think Cutler is part of the solution instead of part of the problem in Chicago. As a matter of fact, I'm sure there are some people listening to me right now saying, oh, this guy, he's got it all wrong, placing the blame on Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler is what is right about the Chicago Bears offense. I don't think that's the case. Cutler is fool's gold. He's a guy who has a big arm, can make all the throws, can play games or even stretches of games where he can look elite, look like he is maybe the answer. However, too often in big situations, Cutler can play games that are just so bad, he can be the reason that his team loses. Cutler has been known for meltdowns, multiple interception games, games in which he takes multiple sacks. What's more than that, he doesn't appear to be a great leader, doesn't appear to be a great teammate. This past season was seen barking at his teammates several different times. Is a guy who in the past has sat out of playoff games with injuries that some people have deemed questionable. And it's not just the media saying this. We've heard some Cutler teammates come out and be openly critical of him. You know, he's a guy who plays poorly at times, and when he does play poorly, just doesn't appear to care. I mean, and maybe that's just the image he portrays, but sometimes it seems like Jay Cutler doesn't care as much about what's going on as the fans or certainly the fellow players. And I think that has been problematic since he's been in Chicago, certainly with his teammates and with some of the fans and media who cover the Bears. Now, for his part, Mark Trestman has said all the right things when it comes to Jay Cutler, has said he can't wait to get his hands on him. And maybe Trestman is just what Cutler needs, because aside from Cutler, aside from the passing game, the Bears have everything else in place. We mentioned the defense that finished 5th in the league in total defense this past season. The Bears have one of the best running games in the league. They had a top 10 running game with Matt Forte and Michael Bush forming a very effective 1-2 punch at running back. And they have some good wide receivers. Brandon Marshall, they brought in last year from Miami, reunited him with Jay Cutler, where he had some success when they played together in Denver. And Marshall was important to the offense this year. He provided them with a type of number one wideout they had missed for the last couple of years. They also drafted Alshon Jeffrey this past season, who I think has a bright future at wide receiver. Really, it's the quarterback position. The fact that Chicago only averaged 187 passing yards this past season falls squarely on Jay Cutler. But once again, instead of a change in personnel, there's been a change in coaches. And this time, instead of just a change in offensive coordinator, it was a change in head coach. Chicago has gone away from a defensive-oriented coach and Lovie Smith, brought in Mark Trestman to jumpstart this offense. We'll see if Trestman can do it. I think out of the 8 new coaches that we have in the NFL this year, Mark Trestman is under the most pressure, both because the guy he's replacing was very popular in that locker room and because the Bears, Trestman is inheriting a ready-made contender. We'll see what he can do with that contender.